Welcome, everybody. Welcome back to the show. And today I am honored to be with somebody who I really found on LinkedIn. And the more I read, the more I became inspired about their story, their inspiration they give to youth and adults on living a great life. They've she has been she's writing a book. She has done a TED talk. She writes songs and records and produces them, and she's my guest today, Rachel Drukenmiller. Thank you for being here, really. So,
Yeah, I'm excited. We're going to have a really good conversation that I think is maybe going to surprise people in the different areas of their life. We're going to support them.
oh, I'm like, look, I've talked sales and marketing, and I think initially when I came in, I was like, oh, let me talk about how she's a speaker and do that. And the more I got into your background, I was like, nope, not a chance. I'm not letting her off this without asking some areas where I think it'll be interesting. I'm really curious about how this conversation goes, right? So, as a quick recap, just to kind of bring people into kind of where you are, right, and through this, you had a corporate career, really successful, 13 years, and then I think right during the pandemic or right before it, hey, I'm going to start my own business and go off. And what what caused that? Like what made you go from that switch to where you're going to bet on yourself and stand in front of people and just talk about really, I guess, how life should be and what it has to offer.
Well, I would say the seed was planted a very, very, very long time ago because I was raised by two entrepreneurs. So I just thought it was normal to work for yourself. I was actually kind of, breaking the rules by working for somebody else. And I was in this corporate job where I had a lot of freedom. And I think something a lot of people don't talk about very, very often is this opportunity that we can have in a corporate job to be an entrepreneur. So to sort of act like an entrepreneur, be really in some ways self-directed, take a lot of initiative, kind of pave your own path within a corporate job. And that's what I did. And I started speaking in 2009. I had my first paid speaking engagement for $75 at my alma mater, speaking to a master's class of HR students.
$75. I'm all in.
Oh, I was beside myself. I was like, that's like two cell phone bills. I mean, it was, I was just out of school making like 35 grand a year and I had student loan bills and a new boyfriend. And I was like, I need money. So I'll take it. And I didn't know what I was doing. For me, so much of my career success, I think has been because I just say yes. So I do what I like to call accept the invitation. Whenever I got an invitation to speak, I said yes. And instead of overthinking how unqualified I maybe was, or how inexperienced I was, or how much of an expert I wasn't, I just said yes to things. And the more I said yes, the more people asked, and the more people asked, the more I did it, and the more reps I got in, and then the better I got, and the more people started inviting me. And so I got to the point where I had my first keynote 2016 at a national conference, and I was so scared I like memorized the whole thing word for word, but did fairly well at that, and the feedback I started to get, I started to pay attention. And I think that's true for anybody. Like we get feedback from people. People might say things in passing and we brush it off or we take it for granted because it comes naturally to us, or
Yeah.
we dismiss it. And so I got to the point where I was like, I really like this speaking thing. So I started to kind of crowd out every other aspect of my job that didn't involve speaking or doing workshops. I was like, I'll do a lunch and learn. I'll speak at a manager retreat. I'll do a training. I just started creating opportunities for myself to do the thing that I wanted to do and to connect it to how it would bring value to our organization and our clients. And I just got to the point where I felt myself expanding. In 2018, I invested in a professional speaker training. And I'm around all these people, dozens of people from around the world that are doing the thing I want to do. And sometimes when you're surrounding yourself with people that show you a new possibility in your life or work, you start to realize, oh, I don't have to do things the way that I've been doing them. I can do my own version of whatever they're doing. And so on a hope and a prayer and with no business plan, I told my boss I was leaving in the spring of 2019 and I left 3 months later. And fortunately, to the power of LinkedIn, the power of getting in all my reps, for years and years and years in corporate, I had established a base of people that knew who I was locally and regionally. And so I was able, and even nationally, because of some of the events I'd gotten to do nationally. And, I was just cobbling this thing together, to be honest with you.
I mean, I think you were raised that way, right? So ingrained in your head, you don't know any better. You're like, this is what we're going to do. Eventually, I'm going to go do it. And there's a lot to be said of how we're raised and the ideas we have. But for those who aren't raised that way, okay, so now I can still be an entrepreneur. But the next thing you said was I invested in myself. And that is something that I have been thinking about a lot. I have not done a lot, and I always joke, there's that joke out. How much I spent on golf lessons this year? A couple $100, went, how much I spent on professional development? Zero. Like, and golf is hitting the white ball and like chasing it and not being good at it. And our entire income, all the stuff we want to do for our kids and the house and the trips with our spouses, and zero. Right. So I've been thinking a lot about that in terms of what do I have to do? Where do I need to go? Or who do I have to invest in? And what is appropriate? And it's funny you say that. Right. And I think, your story is one that I always tell people it just takes guts. I know you downplay it and you're like, oh, I just did it. I don't know whatever. Right. It takes guts. Right. It
Or
does.
delusion. My dad, I think, often says, like, most entrepreneurs we're delusional. Like, we think we have this idea of a thing we want to do, and we think it's going to work.
And now, okay, so now we go into speaking, and you've been doing it, but now your company and your brand and everything is now it's unmuted,
Mhm.
right? And I have some great quotes here that I took from LinkedIn posts of months and months ago that I'm like, oh damn, that's good, right? So I'll let you describe this like way better than I can. So what would you tell people that is your, like what do you speak on and like what is unmuted all about?
So I think at its core, to be unmuted is to stop suppressing what we think and want and need and feel. It's an inner process, first and foremost. It's not just let me speak my piece and say my truth. To me, that can often come off as people just being irresponsible. Not always, but sometimes. And I think the process is really first internal looking within yourself. What am I silencing within myself? What am I suppressing? What emotions are not I'm not giving voice to? When am I sitting in a meeting and I had this feeling inside of me that I'm just I'm being suppressed or silenced or not given an opportunity, and I just sit there, or people are bullying me and I just take it, or how often in an important relationship in my life am I just going with the flow and keeping my mouth shut just to not disrupt the peace, and then I secretly build this resentment and bitterness? Or where in my body am I noticing symptoms or feel like it's talking to me in some way, but I just do something to suppress that signal and that symptom because I don't have time for it. So people mute themselves in different ways. So for me, it's just about connecting in a deeper level to noticing what you are silencing, what you are muting within yourself, and to make the choice to be courageously expressed and boldly alive. So when I think courageous expression might be going to therapy, courageous expression might be pursuing a creative art, for me, singing. A courageous expression might mean raising your hand and sharing an idea at a meeting when you're normally someone who just sits there and tells everyone all your great ideas afterwards. It might be putting yourself forward for a promotion or for an opportunity that you've wanted that you've previously disqualified yourself from. So for me, so much of this unmuting is this of looking within ourselves and thinking, where am I in some way silenced or suppressed?
Okay, so you mentioned three separate pieces which to me is interesting because I didn't put it in that perspective when I started looking at this. I see you speaking at SHRM conferences and HR and all these different like really really cool events. So they're corporate events.
Yeah.
But what you just mentioned was corporate personal relationships like outside of work and your inner self and well-being. And I know you've done a lot of speaking on mental health and to kids and to the youth, which I find phenomenal. Help, me raising two small humans myself. I mean, that kind of struck home. Um, have you done work on, hey, talking on like a personal, level of relationships and talking on your inner self, or is it most of your speaking been done to corporate?
So most of my speaking has been done to corporate. So corporations, associations, um, of varying types. Sometimes it's HR, sometimes it's finance, real estate, accounting,
Whatever. Yeah.
construction, education. But in here and everything I do, and I get this feedback a lot because I ask for feedback after every time I speak. And often people say things like, you know, I really appreciate how this touched on both personal and professional. Often come into these sessions thinking they're going to be fluffy, but I really needed to hear this. Like when someone described what I do, this was years ago, as a soothing gut punch, I was like, yes, that is what I I'm going to wake up something in you that you've been asleep to, but I'm not going to do it by throwing a bucket of water on your head. I'm going to be doing it by slowly turning up the dimmer, in the room so that the room gradually gets lighter and brighter as opposed to just
Yeah.
like, you know,
we
uh,
talked on we talked right before we came on about your dad like doing, I think you said 7 Ironmans from like age 56 to 70. What, it's like crazy, right? Like the idea of doing an Ironman at any age to me is a superhuman like effort, right? It's like what the body's not meant to do. To do it at that age is crazy. But in terms of like you and yourself and your family, and like when you start speaking and just obviously getting clarity on what you believe what unmuted is and all of that, have you used it in your own life in terms of your own relationships and your own, like, how have you seen that play out in your own self?
yeah, well, that's really where it started for me is this internal process. And even like, I want to take one step back and then I'll come back to that. When I'm in corporate, a lot of what I'm doing is I'm helping people unleash what's possible. So at a very kind of fundamental level, if I could more broadly define, an unmuted life is a life that is unleashed. It is a life that is oriented toward possibility as opposed to problems. And it's a life where people have greater fulfillment and joy. And I think we often come in to speak about something or do work in a specific area because we have struggled in that space. And as somebody who has struggled with self doubt, as somebody who has struggled with insecurity, as someone who has struggled with letting myself be seen, as someone who has struggled with suppressing my emotions, as someone who, didn't fit in a lot in certain spaces when I was a kid. And whenever my feelings were hurt, I never told anybody. I went in my room and cried and wrote in a journal. I I was sick a lot as a kid. I had a lot of different health issues and, would just pop another pill or take an amoxicillin and do something to make the symptoms go away. And for me, the beginning of my unmuting was really in a physical way. Um, that I honestly feel most connected to that because I was in my late 20s and I had had acid reflux for a decade. I took medication for it every day. And I figured my mom had it and my grandfather had it. And isn't this just a genetic thing? And I went to see a nutritionist and they did a bunch of testing on me and they found out I was clinically malnourished. I was underweight. My body wasn't absorbing nutrients properly. Certain things weren't functioning the way that they should. And I even looked kind of sallow, like on my face, my discolored. And my nutritionist got me on several dietary changes, a line of supplements because I was so depleted. I had to do things to kind of replenish myself. And it was the first time ever in my life that someone had helped me get to the root cause of why I was sick. And I started to share about it. I started a blog. I used to have a food blog called Rachel's Nourishing Kitchen, and I would teach healthy cooking demos and do all of this stuff. And so for me, it was like the unmuting really happened like on my plate. And it really happened through listening to my body instead of suppressing all the symptoms, which I had done that my whole life. And that's the model for most conventional medicine is like, we can't be bothered. Let's make that go away. And I bought into that, for a really long time. And so for me, it was once I started to realize that I could feel good and I didn't have to be sick all the time and I could have energy and not be congested and not be on medicine that I just assumed I had to be on. It was like, it's almost like I became unmuted, in a certain way. And I started to talk about it and I started to share about it. And I was so passionate and I watched other people make changes and I watched them get better. And I was like, I lit up, when we find a thing that makes us come alive and we connect to something that feels very purposeful, we can't help but come alive. And so that is what really got me into the speaking space more consistently, as I was doing lunch and learns on eating for energy and how to get better sleep and, meal planning made easy. I would do all these classes and I would schlep my kitchen around and teach people how to make kale taste good. And I got in so many of my reps doing all of that. And then I was still doing stuff around corporate culture and employee engagement. It's all connected. But when I burned out in 2017, I got Epstein-Barr virus, which is an acute form of mono, lost my voice. I was the director of well-being who was burned out, not a good look. And I started speaking about that because I realized, what most people don't need someone shoving a head of broccoli in their face. What most people really need is to connect within themselves to why they got to a place of burnout in the first place. And to look at the social emotional aspects of ourselves that most of us are totally disconnected from, that's affecting our engagement at work, that's affecting our energy, that's affecting our relationships, that's affecting our health, our physical health, how our social emotional health and mental health is affecting our physical health. And then I felt compelled to start sharing about that in a more vulnerable way. And people responded to that like in a way that they had never responded to what I'd shared before. I always got good feedback. People, that's great, engaging, blah, blah. But I was honest in a way that I had never been honest before. And I think people were really hungry for it. They don't want somebody up there being shticky, being like, eat 5 servings of this. They didn't want that. They don't want prescriptive. They want someone who's going to like break open their soul.
Yeah, break open their soul. Wow, let me think about that for a second. But you said vulnerable. So I'm gonna ask you a question, and you posted it on LinkedIn. So I'm gonna ask about it. Mm-hmm. You said you wrote a song where you stared into your husband's eyes and started crying and started talking about being unmuted, mm-hmm. and about that whole piece together, right? That personal relationship, obviously the most important personal relationship we have, right, in terms of our lives. Can you expand on that? Yeah. I mean, because I read the post and I was just captivated. I was like, that's honest. And I've had those, anybody who's been there in relationship has had those moments, right? But, we don't share them, and you did. And I was like, I would love to hear about that if you can.
Sure. So, I mean, for so much of, I've been married, for context, I've been married for 13 years, been with my college sweetheart for 18. He's my first and only boyfriend, one and done. And it was actually the week of Valentine's Day that this happened. And we had been a little bit like ships passing. Something was feeling off. And I think sometimes in our relationships, we don't talk about this, but everyone has these experiences of sometimes not feeling desired, sometimes not feeling pursued, sometimes feeling missed, like we're ships passing, or sometimes you can feel like there can be a week that goes by where you're like, we didn't really connect and have any type of meaningful interaction, or when's the last time we hugged each other or held each other? And I was feeling a lot of that. I was feeling stirred up. I don't remember what the initial catalyst was, but we had been sitting at a Valentine's dinner and I was feeling just kind of disconnected. And I was feeling sad about the fact that I felt disconnected. And it was either that night or the night after, I was talking to him about how I was feeling, of wanting to have a little bit more like life in our relationship, or wanting that sort of like fire of desire, wanting to feel that, And I looked at him as I told him this, and I let him see me cry and be sad. And I just stood there, and he just stood there, and he looked at me and I looked at him, and I didn't run away, and I didn't hide, and I didn't say, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. Oh my, we do all the time we apologize for tears. And if I could like change 5 human behaviors, that would be one of them, is do not apologize for your tears. Because we're so ashamed of them. We feel like we're burdening somebody. We think we make somebody else uncomfortable because we cry. That's on them. we don't shame people for laughing if it's appropriate to laugh in a given moment, but for some reason we feel we need to apologize for tears. So I felt that in that moment. I just stood there. We just stood with each other, and I just let myself feel the sadness I was feeling. He hugged me, and then I went to bed, and I couldn't. It was like 11:30 at night, and all of a sudden I just get this lyric in my head, and I go into our bathroom in the hallway, and I got out my voice notes, and I just start writing it down of like, tears streamed down her face. For years they had no place. The good girl knew she had to hide them. Just wipe them away. Come on, please, not today. She's breaking down inside behind them. And that's what I wrote because that's who I had to be. Because good little girls don't cry and good little girls don't get angry. And for most of my life, I was the golden child. My parents separated briefly. They were a great example in a lot of ways. They struggled in their marriage when I was little, separated briefly, got back together. But kids internalize those things differently. And I internalized it as, well, you just need to be good all the time. You need to not cause any trouble. You just need to follow the rules and get along and be good. And if you are crying because you're upset, or you're yelling because you're upset, that's going to cause more stress on the system. And that role has already been taken. That is not yours. Mm-hmm. So I spent a lot of my life hiding my tears. Mm-hmm. And it wasn't until a therapy session the year I burned out, because I was like, maybe I should go to therapy because I burned out. And at 32, something clearly wasn't working from the first time I went to therapy.
Yeah.
And I told her, I said, I've had all these issues my whole life around my throat. Like I had strep throat as a kid and bronchitis and respiratory and sinus issues and acid reflux and sore throats and laryngitis, all this stuff. And my therapist looked at me and she said, there's a theory that we store emotions in different parts of our body. And the throat is where we store sadness.
Oh, damn. Okay.
At which point I start sobbing.
Right. At that point, hand me the tissues. I'm like, all right. So
and I was like, yeah, because that's the thing I was. So now I'm so proud of my ability to be sad in front of people and to not run away. Mm-hmm. And in my marriage too, because I have the capacity to hold that space for myself. I have the capacity to hold that space for others and not be alarmed by it or be like, oh, I need to make them stop crying. No, maybe they just need to let that out. I just need to hold space for it. People cry all the time at my talks and they're like, oh, I was trying to hold back tears. Oh, I was trying. And I'm like, why? If you felt compelled to cry, let yourself cry. It's fine. It's part of the process.
I'm going to get this wrong and please correct me. But I remember one of the speeches I loved hearing was the, NC State coach. I'm here in Raleigh, Jim Valvano of, never give up. Right. Mm-hmm. And he said, every day you should laugh, you should think, you should cry, and that's a good day. Mm-hmm. Right. And I think just hearing that, I get chills even thinking about that speech, is that it's kind of what you said. You have your range of emotions and it's okay to have. And I think, as a guy, I can speak. You're like, hey, zero tolerance for that, right? We're gonna be like, we're through and through. There's no emotion. Right. I don't care what happens. Right. And that's how we are, how I was raised. Honestly. Right. So, and then, you go to the military and, for God's sake, you don't do that. No, and then all of a sudden, and I've been with you, I've been to therapy and right at burnout. And, I was like, hey, what are these tissues here for? And about 3 minutes in, I was like, oh, I know why they're here. Right. Like, oh, I get it. I was like, damn it. And I remember saying, damn it, to my therapist. And I was like, I shouldn't say that. And she's like, oh, you're apologizing for crying. And I said, yeah. And she's like, okay, we'll start there. And I was like, oh, I'm in for it now. Like, here we go. Right. Like I'm 3 minutes in, I've already messed up. Right. So, but to your point, I think we all suppress. And I remember you posted on this, and it really, man, our youth, and my kids are they're in college now, and I'm a little beyond this, but it's still scary. It's that they did that survey, and they did an anonymous survey, and and passed out the results to all the kids and said, okay, if your survey says I didn't feel, I felt ashamed, raise your hand, right? And he
Mm-hmm.
said, if you, thought about suicide in the past 3, 4, 5 months, raise your hand. And you said 60% of the kids had done that,
If
right?
you
And
or someone you know, if you or
yes,
someone you know
thank
has
you.
felt hopeless, has felt hopelessness, or has had thoughts of suicide.
It was, I was like, oh my, right? Like I couldn't, if I was a teacher or administrator or somebody sitting in that auditorium, I would be, it would take my breath away, right? And it's scary. But and I've had someone die close to me, right, because of suicide. And I think mental health is something that we're just now beginning to start to talk about. It's been, I mean, I've been in business long enough to where a mental health day,
Mm.
we used to laugh at that, literally make fun of that, right? Literally make fun of that. And now we're actually going, okay, wait a second. Let's actually let's have these conversations, and let's have people like you come in and speak on, hey, oh, by the way, this is what, you can't keep everything bottled up. You have to keep, this is how we can do better in life and such like that. So
Yeah.
amazing, amazing.
It's
So we have a little bit of time left, and I,
yeah.
I always I want to
Mhm.
be respectful of your time because I know you got actually a life out of work, right? And I have to go figure out what my little humans are doing here, right? That they're home from college, so I do like my time with them, even though they don't love time with dad, but I do like my time with them. Um, you have a book. You're writing the book, correct?
Writing a book. Yeah, I'm writing a book and I'm in conversations right now determining my publishing path. So very likely this book will come out in 2026.
Yep.
Um, but yeah, I started writing a book in 2018 and then it was the wrong book. It was not the book I was meant to write with somebody else, actually. I was writing with somebody else. I'd been approached. And in retrospect, and I wrote 40,000 words of this book. And then the week the pandemic hit, that got pulled out from under me. And I initially was devastated because along with that, so went most of my business that was booked because my only source of income was in person speaking. But I've come to realize that since that happened, so many things. I've become a songwriter. I've gone through 4 years of therapy. I've been in the car accident that changed my life. I've launched a business. I've run a business for 5 years. I would have written just a subpar book if I'd written it the first time. And so now I'm in the process and I'm really excited about how it's coming together.
That's amazing. And it takes, look, it takes a long time. I know I've talked to folks and they say writing it is, everybody I've talked to has said I'm not writing another one. Like once you go through the front, they're like, I'm not doing it. Like I love it, but I'm not doing it anymore. Like it's out and it's over. But I would look forward to that. So let's have a little bit, one serious question and then two just a little, yeah, a little fun. So the one serious one, what do you want people to take away from this? They've listened for 28 minutes. Like, what should they take away from this?
Well, there's two questions I like people to ask themselves. One is, in what ways or what way are you silencing, muting, or holding yourself back in some way in your life? So, what's one way you're doing that? Only you would know. So, getting clarity, looking within yourself. The way we get clarity is, I believe, through the power of curiosity. So, I'm a big question asker, as opposed to saying, this is the path everyone needs to take. So, what's the way you're silencing yourself? And how about this second part of that? What becomes possible if you stop silencing that part of yourself? In the best case scenario, what becomes possible if you, as I like to say, unmute yourself in that way? What
Love
becomes
it.
possible in your life, in the lives of the people that you love, in your work, in the world around you, in the people you serve? I mean, really taking it multiple layers and multiple levels. And that question, the first is like honest look in the mirror, and the second one is a possibility activator. And I think all of us need invitations to have possibility activated within us. And the last thing I would say, so those two questions, the last thing I would say is that the thing that gives us the courage to do part two of that is believing in our own inherent worth and value, believing that we are somebody. And there are too many people that, unfortunately, through messages they received in childhood, from a parent, from a peer, from a teacher, from a coach, have come to believe that they are not somebody who is all that special, and that they don't really matter all that much, and that they are far from enough. And I have felt that way many, 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 many times. I still feel that way sometimes. If you can connect to your own sense of worth, that like, do you know how many things had to go right from, I mean, think about how many people had to meet in such a way as they did and procreate in such a way that they did at the time that they did, on the day that they did, in the place that they did, for all of your ancestors to exist. And then for you to somehow make it all the way through that chain and for you to come into the picture. I mean, the math doesn't math, you know, it doesn't make it, it's unfathomable for us as humans to understand the scope of how any one of us comes to be. So when someone thinks that they're not somebody, that they don't matter, it's like, let's just have a little bit of history lesson here. You matter so much. And the fact that you exist is enough. And when you really believe that, I'm still working on this. And it's why I talk about it. I talk about the things I struggle with myself. When we really, really believe, I posted today, nothing to lose, nothing to prove. When we believe that deep in the core of who we are, that we are enough as we are, we have value, that the essence of who we are is intact, no matter what challenges we face and what failures we have, that gives us the courage to actually move toward the possibility that is activated when we ask ourselves what becomes possible when we unmute that part of ourselves.
There it is. I always say during every 30, 35-minute kind of conversation, I always say, there's a minute, there's 45 seconds, minute and a half of where, in this case, I think it was about 2.5 of like, that's it. That's the moment where I go, man, take that away, replay that, hit the little button and go back and listen to it again. And I started writing it down. I was like, well, I don't need to write it down, Dave. I have it recorded. I can just go back, dumb, right? So, all right, let me leave on a couple little like, fun ones. Let's actually have a little bit of fun. Favorite song that you drive to, you sing along to in the car that cannot be yours. So you're just listening in the car. I'm like, oh, turn that up, from the college day or current day. What's a fun one?
Oh my gosh, there's so many. This is like asking a chef to pick.
You can have a couple. It's okay.
Pick your favorite food, chef.
That's true. I am asking a song, writer, artist. That's true. But are you more of like the college day will bring you back memories, or are you more current?
Jock Jams. So let me tell you, I had every Jock Jams CD when I was growing up. So like,
tell you what my wedding was. Now my wedding was 24 in 2000. To tell you what my wedding was, we played Jock Jams as we walked into the rehearsal, right? And like a typical Northeast, I'm pretty sure all of our families were already drunk at that moment of time of us actually walking in, right? So it was, I still remember it. I think it was like the dun dun, hey, like we walk into Jock Jams. People did like all kind of like cool violin stuff. We walked into Jock Jams on a CD.
Dude,
right?
I support that. So I like that music, but it's more like artists that I like. So like Adele and Lauren Daigle, Shania Twain. Man, give me some Shania. Give me some Shania Twain. I saw her in concert last year. She was.
How about like Usher? I went to the Usher concert.
Usher
right.
songs. Like I dance to. I've also sing along to because I know a lot of it. There's just so much. I love music.
That's an unfair question. All right, let's make it. So what's the go-to snack? Like the guilty pleasure snack. That was a good one.
My go-to snack. I love sweet potato fries. Sweet potato waffle fries. Is that a snack?
Those are good. In like the syrup
chips and
stuff
guac
that comes with it.
Yeah.
Oh my God, yes.
I love sweet potato waffle fries.
You don't have to eat. I don't think I can eat for, apparently like the little app says like I'm not allowed to eat for like a long time after I eat those. I'm like, I had 2,000 calories. That's awesome. Great.
That's hilarious. Or jerky. I mean, I do like a lot of like jerky sticks. Like I'm a big fan of like, because it's like quick protein and like,
that's not a guilty snack.
It's not a guilty. I don't have a lot of guilty pleasure things.
Well, quick protein is not.
I'm a health coach.
Yeah, seriously, quick protein is not a guilty pleasure snack, right? Even sweet potato is not exactly like that's not even good either.
I know.
My questions suck. I asked a
Chips and
health coach.
guac.
I asked
I
a
can't
health
eat
coach how
certain
to eat
things.
in a song, right? That's bad.
I
All
have
right.
dietary restrictions, so I'm a little bit of one of those
Yeah.
people that can't eat certain things. So I might like to, but like if I did, I'd pay for it. So I just
All
don't.
right.
So I'm like a health nut. So it's kind of a
I
hard question for
I
me.
picked my question. My question sucked. I'll get better. So, well, look, I don't think I'm thinking back to some of the folks I've talked to, and truly, I don't think I've had a more vulnerable conversation.
Oh,
And I really hope that you folks, and if you got this far in the podcast, thank you. I truly hope you go back about 5 minutes and listen to that part where you said, you are enough. And I think more people need to hear that, and I think more people need to really, really embrace it. And look, I know I'm going to go listen to this, and I always write down notes. Everybody I talk to, I have a little page on everybody, and this one's going to be different. This one's different. So, truly, thank you, Rachel. It was great having you. And I so look forward to seeing all your stuff like online. So thank you so much.
you're welcome. I can sing you out with just a line or three
Oh,
lines
that'd be
from one of my
so.
songs.
I was gonna. I didn't want to go there, but I was like, I don't know how she feels, or like, yes. And like, what song is this from?
Somebody. So if we're circling back to that clip that's like the money clip from this
Yes,
episode, this is a
yes.
song. I wrote the song to my 9-year-old self who needed to know that she was somebody who mattered without having to earn it, prove it, or achieve it. So I'll just say it's just a very simple last couple lines at the end of the
Hell
song.
yeah, please
So yes,
take
just
this
a
out.
reminder to everybody
Go ahead,
listening.
please.
Here we go. All right. Like close your eyes, hand on heart, really, really feel what I'm gonna say. Okay. All right. You are somebody. You are somebody. You matter and you are enough. You are somebody. You are somebody. You matter and you are enough. You are enough. 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 So much more than enough.
Man, that's good. Thank you so much. That is what, man, I'm so jealous. I can't sing nor anything of that. I'm so jealous. Well, thank you so much. Enjoy. Have a great night. And, you know, tell your husband thank you for letting me steal you away for about a half hour here after work. Okay.
Of course. You're
All right,
very welcome.
everybody. Be good. We're back next week. And take care.